The easiest word I ever said was no, and it almost changed the rest of my life. My name is Claire Bennett, and until 6 months ago, I believed every dangerous man looked dangerous. I believed power always announced itself with loud voices, expensive cars, or headlines people whispered about over morning coffee. I was wrong. The man who quietly stepped into my physical therapy clinic that rainy Tuesday afternoon looked like someone who belonged on the cover of a business magazine. His charcoal suit fit perfectly. His dark hair was brushed back without a strand out of place. His pale blue eyes never wandered around the room the way most first-time clients did. They found me immediately, calm and steady, as though they had been looking for me long before I ever noticed him. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows while thunder rolled somewhere beyond the Boston skyline. Inside, the scent of eucalyptus lotion and fresh coffee filled the waiting room. My last patient had just left, and I was already thinking about the 40-minute drive home, leftover pasta in my refrigerator, and the novel waiting on my nightstand. "Mr. Moretti?" I asked after glancing at the appointment sheet. He nodded once. "Adrian." His voice was low, measured, the kind that made everyone else instinctively lower theirs. "I only need a few minutes." I offered the polite smile years of customer service had taught me. "If you're here for treatment, I'd be happy to schedule an evaluation." "I'm not injured." "Then what can I help you with?" His eyes never left mine. "Dinner." I actually laughed because it sounded so impossible. No introduction. No explanation. Just one word delivered like it belonged there. "No." I answered before my brain had time to invent a softer version. His expression didn't change. Most men looked embarrassed after rejection. Some looked annoyed. Adrian simply studied me as if my answer had confirmed something he already expected. "You didn't even think about it," he said. "I don't have to." I gathered patient files from the counter, hoping the conversation would end naturally. "I don't date strangers." "Fair enough." He reached into his jacket, and for one heartbeat, I wondered if he planned to hand me a business card. Instead, he placed a single white lily on the reception desk. No name, no phone number, no note, just the flower. "Have a good evening, Claire." Hearing my name made me pause. I had never introduced myself. By the time I looked toward the door, he was already walking into the rain, hands in his coat pockets, disappearing behind the reflections of passing headlights. My stomach tightened for reasons I couldn't explain. Maybe it was how quietly he arrived. Maybe it was how easily he accepted rejection. Or maybe it was the strange feeling that saying no hadn't ended anything at all. It had only begun. The white lily should have disappeared from my thoughts by the next morning. But somehow it followed me through every patient, every cup of coffee, and every mile of traffic between my apartment and the clinic. It stayed fresh on the corner of my desk for 4 days without dropping a single petal, and I never admitted to myself that I had carried it home instead of throwing it away. Life settled back into its ordinary rhythm, or at least I tried to convince myself that it had. My mornings began before sunrise, my evenings ended with frozen dinners and paperwork, and my weekends disappeared beneath laundry, grocery shopping, and phone calls with my older sister in Seattle. It was the predictable life I had spent years building, the kind that left no room for mysterious strangers with calm blue eyes. Then little things began happening. One chilly Thursday morning, I rushed toward the subway station after oversleeping. Just as I reached the curb, a cyclist sped through the crosswalk against the light. Before I could step forward, someone gently caught my elbow and guided me back half a step. The bicycle flashed past so quickly that I barely felt the wind against my jacket. I turned immediately to thank whoever had stopped me, but the sidewalk was already crowded. No familiar face. No charcoal suit. Nothing except dozens of strangers hurrying toward work. 2 days later, my old sedan refused to start outside the grocery store. I sighed, already calculating how much another repair would cost, when a roadside assistance truck pulled into the parking lot. The driver stepped out smiling. "Miss Bennett?" he asked. Someone already covered the service request. I frowned. That has to be a mistake. He checked his tablet. Everything is paid in full. Before I could ask another question, he was already replacing my dead battery. I searched every receipt and every email that night. No charge. No explanation. Just another unanswered question. By the following week, I began noticing the same dark SUV parked across the street from the clinic every afternoon. It never blocked traffic. It never lingered when I left. It simply appeared for an hour or two before disappearing again. I told myself it belonged to someone working nearby. I repeated that explanation until I almost believed it. Almost. Friday evening arrived with cold rain and empty sidewalks. I locked the clinic door, tucked my keys into my coat pocket, and hurried toward the parking lot. Halfway there, I realized I had forgotten my phone inside. Groaning, I turned back. 30 seconds later, a delivery van rolled through the space where I would have been walking if I had kept going. The driver never even noticed. I stood beneath the awning, heart pounding harder than it should have, watching the taillights disappear into the wet streets. When I finally unlocked the clinic again, something rested on the reception desk. Another single white lily. This time there was a note beneath it. For simple words written in neat black ink. Stay aware. Stay safe, Claire. I did not sleep much after finding the note. For words should not have been enough to change the rhythm of my thoughts, but they echoed through every quiet moment like footsteps in an empty hallway. Stay aware. Stay safe, Claire. Whoever had written them knew my name, knew where I worked, and somehow knew exactly when I would return for my forgotten phone. That realization unsettled me far more than the note itself. Monday morning arrived beneath clear autumn skies, and for the first time in years I checked my rearview mirror more than the traffic ahead of me. Nothing unusual appeared. The familiar coffee shop stood on the corner. Parents hurried children toward school. Construction workers unloaded lumber from a pickup truck. Everything looked painfully ordinary, yet I could not shake the feeling that someone was quietly watching from somewhere beyond my sight. Around noon, my receptionist walked into my office carrying a sealed envelope. "This was delivered for you," she said. The courier left before I could ask any questions. There was no return address. My heartbeat quickened as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It showed me leaving the grocery store 3 nights earlier with 2 shopping bags in my hands. I turned the picture over expecting another message, but the back was blank. Cold spread through my chest. Someone had taken that photograph without my knowledge. I grabbed my phone immediately and called the local police non-emergency number. The officer listened politely, asked several questions, and promised to document the report. Without a clear threat or identifiable suspect, there was little they could investigate. I understood their position, yet hearing those words did nothing to calm me. That evening I drove home before sunset instead of staying late to finish paperwork. Halfway through the drive my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Claire." I recognized Adrian's voice instantly. Calm, controlled, completely certain. "How did you get this number?" I demanded. "That is not important." "It is extremely important." He paused for a moment. "Did you receive the photograph?" My hands tightened around the steering wheel. "You know about that?" "Yes." "Did you send it?" Silence filled the line for several seconds. "No, then who did?" "Someone who wants your attention." Anger rushed in faster than fear. "You expect me to believe that? Ever since you walked into my clinic, strange things have been happening. Flowers, notes, photographs. You know everything, Adrian. Maybe you are the reason all of this started." Another quiet pause. "You are wrong." "Then prove it." His answer came softly enough that I almost missed it. "Not yet." Before I could say another word, the call ended. I pulled into my apartment parking lot with frustration burning hotter than confusion. Every answer led back to him. Every mystery carried his shadow. Standing beside my car beneath the fading orange light, I made a decision. If Adrian Moretti knew the truth, I was finished waiting for him to tell me. I was going to find it myself, even if the answers were nothing like I expected. The next morning I canceled my lunch break and began searching for Adrian Moretti the old-fashioned way. Public records, business websites, charity boards, newspaper archives. I expected to find rumors, lawsuits, or photographs of someone who enjoyed being seen. Instead, I found almost nothing. His name appeared only beside investment firms, historical preservation projects, children's hospitals, and scholarship foundations. Every article described him as a private businessman who rarely gave interviews. It felt strangely incomplete, as though the internet knew he existed but refused to explain why people lowered their voices whenever they said his name. By late afternoon, my eyes ached from staring at the screen, and my coffee had gone cold beside the keyboard. My receptionist knocked softly before stepping inside. "Claire, there is someone asking for you." My stomach tightened immediately. "Who?" He would not give his name. I walked into the reception area expecting to see Adrian. Instead, I found an older man wearing a navy jacket and a Boston Red Sox cap. He smiled politely before handing me a small envelope. Someone asked me to deliver this. Who? He simply shrugged. I was paid to bring it here. Before I could stop him, he disappeared through the front door and blended into the evening crowd. Inside the envelope was another photograph. This one showed my apartment building taken from across the street. Written beneath the picture were 6 words. We know where you live now. My heartbeat became so loud, I barely heard the clinic door open again. Everyone leave through the back, a familiar voice said calmly. Adrian stood just inside the entrance, rain glistening across the shoulders of his dark coat. His expression remained controlled, but his eyes moved across every corner of the room before settling on me. You should not be here, I snapped. Neither should whoever sent that. I held up the photograph. His face did not change, yet something colder settled behind his eyes. When did this arrive? 2 minutes ago. He looked toward the front windows where evening traffic rolled past beneath glowing streetlights. Lock the doors. You do not get to tell me what to do. Claire. He spoke my name quietly, almost gently. Please. Something in his voice made me hesitate. Not fear. Urgency. My receptionist quickly turned the deadbolt while I stared at Adrian, waiting for another impossible explanation. Instead, he reached into his coat and removed a folded newspaper clipping dated almost 3 weeks earlier. The headline described several break-ins across nearby neighborhoods. Every address had one thing in common. They surrounded my apartment by only a few blocks. Why are you showing me this now? I whispered. Because whoever has been watching you is becoming bolder. I searched his face for satisfaction, manipulation, anything that would prove he was orchestrating the nightmare surrounding me. I found only exhaustion. You knew this could happen, I said. I knew it might. Then why did you not tell me? Adrian looked toward the rain-streaked window before answering in a voice barely above a whisper. Because the safest truth is sometimes the hardest one to believe, and I needed you alive long enough to hear it. Rain blurred the city into streaks of silver as Adrian drove me away from the clinic without saying another word. I sat in the passenger seat with the photograph resting on my lap, reading the same 6 words over and over until they lost their meaning. We know where you live now. Every traffic light painted his face with shifting colors, but his expression never changed. Calm, focused, as though he had rehearsed this drive 100 times before. Where are we going? I finally asked. Somewhere public, he replied. Somewhere with cameras and people. We stopped outside a small waterfront cafe overlooking Boston Harbor. Even with the steady drizzle, customers filled the tables beneath heated awnings, sipping coffee while ferries crossed the gray water. Adrian chose a table facing both the entrance and the street. I noticed it immediately. He always seemed to know exactly where to sit. I wrapped my hands around a mug of hot tea, trying to slow the trembling in my fingers. You keep telling me pieces of the truth, I said quietly. You never tell me the whole thing. He looked out toward the harbor instead of answering. A cargo ship moved slowly through the fog, its horn echoing across the water. Claire, have you ever wondered why every strange thing ended before it became worse? I frowned. What is that supposed to mean? The cyclist missed you. Your car was repaired before you were stranded. You forgot your phone 30 seconds before a delivery truck crossed your path. None of those moments were accidents. My pulse quickened. You arranged all of that? No. He finally met my eyes. I responded to them. Before I could ask another question, his phone vibrated once. He glanced at the screen for less than a second before slipping it back into his pocket. His posture changed almost imperceptibly, his shoulders becoming slightly straighter, his attention sharpening toward the cafe entrance. We are leaving, he said. Now. You still have not answered my questions. I will. Just not here. Frustration burned through me. I am tired of people deciding what is best for me. I stood instead of following him. I am going home. Adrian remained perfectly still. Please do not. You do not control my life. I turned toward the sidewalk before he spoke again. Claire. There was something different in his voice this time. Not authority. Not confidence. Fear. I stopped. A city bus rolled past between us and the street, spraying rainwater across the curb. When it cleared, I noticed a small crowd gathering farther down the block around a disabled delivery truck that had begun releasing steam from beneath its hood. Drivers slowed. Pedestrians crossed away from the congestion. Adrian quietly guided me toward the opposite side of the sidewalk, placing himself between me and the growing confusion without touching me once. Within minutes, firefighters arrived, redirected traffic, and safely assisted everyone nearby. No one was hurt. No panic followed. Just an unexpected interruption that left the entire block temporarily closed. Adrian waited until the noise settled before speaking again. Sometimes protection is not dramatic, he said softly. Sometimes it is simply moving someone one step in a different direction before they ever realize why. For the first time since meeting him, I stopped seeing a man who wanted to control my choices. I saw someone carrying the exhausting weight of watching every direction at once, hoping I would never notice how often he quietly chose my safety over his own comfort. I barely spoke during the drive back to my apartment. The city lights reflected across the windshield in long ribbons of gold, but my thoughts stayed fixed on one sentence. Sometimes protection is simply moving someone one step in a different direction. It sounded reasonable. It sounded sincere. That was exactly why I did not trust it. My entire life had been built on making my own decisions, and now every answer seemed to arrive through a man who refused to explain himself completely. When Adrian stopped outside my building, he turned off the engine but made no move to unlock the doors. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument. "I cannot keep doing this," I said at last. "I appreciate that you believe you are helping me, but I cannot live wondering who is watching me every minute of the day." He nodded once, almost as though he had expected those exact words. "Then tell me what you want." I looked directly at him. "I want my life back." For the first time since we met, I saw disappointment cross his face. It lasted only a second before disappearing behind the same calm expression he always wore. "If that is your choice," he said quietly, "I will respect it." He reached into the center console and placed a small silver key on the dashboard. "This opens a safe apartment downtown. It is available if you ever change your mind." I pushed the key back toward him. "I am not leaving my home." He did not argue. He simply slipped the key into his pocket and unlocked the doors. "Good night, Claire." His voice carried no anger, no frustration. Somehow that made walking away even harder. The following morning, everything looked wonderfully ordinary. Patients filled my schedule. My receptionist laughed at a joke from the delivery driver. Fresh sunlight poured through the clinic windows, warming the hardwood floors. For several hours, I convinced myself that I had imagined the strange tension surrounding the past few weeks. Then just after lunch, my receptionist frowned at her computer screen. "That is strange," she murmured. "What is?" I asked. "Someone canceled every appointment you had for tomorrow." They knew every patient's full name and confirmation number. A chill ran through me. Did they identify themselves? She slowly shook her head. They sounded professional. I assumed it was someone from the office. I immediately checked the schedule. Every cancellation had been made within 12 minutes. Every patient had already been rescheduled somewhere else. There was no demand, no message. Only an invisible hand rearranging my life without permission. My phone vibrated before I could process what I was seeing. One text message appeared from an unknown number. "Do not stay late tonight." My heartbeat accelerated. Seconds later, another message arrived from Adrian. "Leave the clinic now. I am already outside." I looked through the front window and saw his familiar charcoal sedan parked across the street. He was leaning against the driver's door, scanning both ends of the block instead of looking at the entrance. I had insisted on facing whatever came without him. Yet somehow, before I even realized something was wrong, he had already arrived. For a long moment, I could not move. Patients continued chatting in the waiting room. The printer hummed behind the reception desk, and somewhere outside a siren drifted through downtown Boston. But every ordinary sound suddenly felt distant. I looked from the anonymous warning on my phone to Adrian standing across the street beneath a gray October sky. He was not waving. He was not calling again. He simply watched the block with the quiet focus of someone expecting something before everyone else noticed it. I apologized to my last patient, explaining that an unexpected emergency had forced me to close early. My receptionist offered to stay and finish the paperwork, but I insisted we leave together. Locking the clinic door suddenly felt strangely important. As soon as we stepped outside, Adrian crossed the street. His eyes briefly met mine before shifting toward the nearby intersections, parked cars, and passing pedestrians. "Everyone leaves together," he said calmly. "Nobody walks alone today." My receptionist looked confused, but nodded anyway. A rideshare vehicle arrived within minutes. and Adrian waited until she safely pulled away before turning back to me. "Now you can be angry," he said quietly. "But first, I need you somewhere else." I folded my arms. "No more secrets." He gave a slow nod. "No more." We drove north along the harbor, where the afternoon sun struggled through heavy clouds. Instead of another office or hotel, Adrian stopped beside an old brick church overlooking the water. The parking lot was nearly empty except for a maintenance truck and two elderly volunteers arranging flower boxes near the entrance. The peaceful setting immediately lowered my guard. He led me inside without speaking. The sanctuary smelled of polished wood and candle wax. Colored light filtered through stained glass windows, painting soft patterns across the pews. Adrian walked toward the last row instead of the altar and sat quietly. After several moments, he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and removed a worn leather wallet. From it, he carefully unfolded an old photograph with creased edges. He handed it to me without a word. I stared at the picture until my breathing slowed. A younger version of my father stood beside another man outside a neighborhood fire station. Both were smiling despite soot covering their jackets. My father's arm rested across the other man's shoulders as though they had survived something difficult together. "Who is this?" I whispered. Adrian looked toward the stained glass instead of the photograph. "My father." I searched his face for any sign that this was another carefully constructed story, but all I found was quiet grief. "They volunteered together 23 years ago," he continued. "One winter night, a warehouse caught fire. My father became trapped after helping several people reach the exit. Your father refused to leave him behind." My fingers tightened around the old photograph. "He never told me that." Adrian smiled sadly. "Some people do extraordinary things and never think they deserve credit for them." He looked directly into my eyes for the first time since we entered the church. "Before your father passed away, he made one request. If life ever gave me the chance, he wanted someone to make sure his little girl was never alone when she truly needed help." I gave him my word, Claire. I have been trying to keep that promise ever since. The church remained silent long after Adrian stopped speaking. I kept staring at the faded photograph, tracing the familiar smile on my father's face with my thumb. Growing up, he had always been the kind of man who fixed broken fences for neighbors without accepting payment and stopped to help strangers change flat tires on cold winter mornings. Saving someone without mentioning it afterwards sounded exactly like him. What I could not understand was why he had trusted Adrian's father enough to leave behind a promise that had somehow survived more than 2 decades. "Why did you never tell me?" I asked quietly. Adrian folded his hands together before answering. "Because your father never wanted that promise to become a burden. He asked for protection, not gratitude." We sat there for another minute while afternoon sunlight filtered through the stained glass, covering the old wooden floor with patches of blue, gold, and crimson. For the first time since meeting Adrian, the silence between us felt peaceful instead of uncertain. As we stepped outside, the crisp harbor air carried the scent of salt water and fallen leaves. A gentle breeze moved through the maple trees lining the churchyard. Adrian glanced toward the parking lot before opening the passenger door for me. "There is one more place I need to show you." 20 minutes later, we stopped outside a community rehabilitation center on the south side of the city. The building looked familiar, although I had never worked there. Children played on a small playground while elderly patients walked carefully along a landscaped garden path with physical therapists beside them. "Why are we here?" I asked. Adrian nodded toward the bronze dedication plaque near the entrance. My breath caught as I walked closer. The rehabilitation wing had been named after my father. Beneath his name was a simple inscription, in honor of a man who believed every life deserved another chance. I turned toward Adrian in disbelief. "I have never seen this before." "Because the center requested privacy for the families involved," he answered. "The renovation was completed after your father passed away." My eyes wandered across the campus. New therapy equipment filled the gymnasium, visible through the windows. Parents smiled while children practiced walking between colorful balance bars. Everything felt hopeful. Everything felt alive. "You paid for this," I whispered. Adrian hesitated before giving the smallest nod. "My father wanted to. After he passed away, I finished what he started." Emotion tightened my throat. Suddenly, every unanswered question from the past several weeks began fitting together. The scholarship foundation where I had received unexpected financial assistance during graduate school. The anonymous donation that had replaced outdated therapy equipment at my first clinic. The grant that expanded pediatric rehabilitation services last year. I had celebrated each blessing without ever knowing the same invisible hand had quietly stood behind them. Adrian never asked for recognition. He never waited for thanks. He simply continued honoring a promise made between two fathers long before either of us understood its meaning. Looking at him now, I no longer saw a powerful man trying to shape my future. I saw someone who had spent years protecting pieces of my life without ever asking to become part of it. And for the first time, I wondered whether the safest place I had been searching for had quietly been walking beside me all along. 3 weeks later, the anonymous messages stopped. No more mysterious photographs appeared beneath my door. No unfamiliar calls interrupted quiet evenings. Life slowly settled into something that resembled normal again, although I had learned that normal could look very different after the truth found its way into your heart. The first thing I did was visit my father's grave with the old photograph Adrian had shown me. Autumn leaves drifted across the cemetery while cool wind carried the scent of pine through the hills. I knelt beside the headstone and smiled for the first time in what felt like months. "You trusted the right family," I whispered. "I finally understand why." When I stood, I noticed fresh white lilies resting beside the stone. I smiled without needing to ask who had placed them there. Some promises did not need signatures. They only needed faithful people. Work at the clinic became busy again. Patients returned. Children laughed through difficult therapy sessions. Elderly couples celebrated small victories with tears in their eyes after taking a few more independent steps. Every ordinary moment suddenly felt extraordinary because I no longer took quiet days for granted. Adrian never appeared unexpectedly again. He never called without reason. He never sent another flower to my office. Instead, he waited. Weeks passed before I finally dialed the number he had once given me. He answered after the second ring. "Claire." Hearing my name spoken in his familiar calm voice made me smile before I realized I was smiling. "Are you busy?" I asked. "Not anymore." We met at the same waterfront cafe where he had first tried to explain pieces of the truth. The harbor shimmered beneath a clear evening sky, while ferries crossed the water in slow, graceful lines. This time, neither of us watched the entrance or scanned the street. We simply sat across from one another with 2 cups of coffee growing cold between us. "I owe you an apology," I said quietly. Adrian tilted his head slightly. "You never owed me anything. I judged you before I understood you." He smiled, softer than I had ever seen before. Most people would have. I looked out across the harbor where sunlight danced across the waves. "Why did you keep going after I pushed you away so many times?" His answer came without hesitation. "Because a promise is easiest to keep when it is convenient. Its true value appears when it costs something." I felt tears warming my eyes, but this time they carried gratitude instead of fear. I reached across the table and gently rested my hand over his. "I am not here because of your promise," I said. "I am here because somewhere along the way you stopped protecting me out of obligation and started caring about me as Claire." He looked at our hands for a quiet moment before meeting my eyes again. "You came back because you chose to." I nodded. "Yes." The evening breeze carried the scent of the ocean while the first harbor lights reflected across the water like scattered stars. For months, I believed the strongest people were the ones who could command a room without raising their voices. I was wrong again. The strongest people are the ones who quietly keep their word long after everyone else has forgotten it was ever given. Because real love is never measured by how tightly someone holds on to you, but by how faithfully they stand beside you until you are finally free to choose them for yourself.